Nora Sinclair stood motionless as Thomas Greer, CEO of Everwin Group, told her she was no longer needed, just 2 days before Thanksgiving. The words hadn't even finished echoing across the conference room before her body went completely still, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. Across the long glass table, Thomas adjusted his cufflinks as if he'd just reminded her to mute a calendar invite, not dismantled the last 9 years of her career. A thin, pleasant smile hovered on his lips. In the corner, the HR director blinked slowly, already looking at the door. A week earlier, Nora had felt the first tremors. A strange email thread with Savannah Lee CC'd on a high-level distribution. A calendar invite about strategic restructuring that she wasn't on. The shift had been subtle, calculated, but now sitting in the soft hum of recessed lights and piped-in confidence jazz. She realized the blade had always been coming. It just took its time. "It's nothing personal," Thomas said gently, tapping the side of his tablet. "We're pivoting fast, and this structure didn't reflect where we're headed." Nora said nothing. She didn't flinch, didn't smile. 1,000 things bloomed in her mind like flares. Market crises, she'd helped Everwin survive partnerships, she'd chased across time zones, late nights spent building teams from scratch she'd joined when the company was 2 pay periods away from collapse. She'd stayed through the growing pains, but none of that was in the room now. Only the woman in the taupe wool coat who stood too tall to break in front of them. She nodded once, the gesture crisp and contained. "Understood." Thomas looked relieved. She hadn't cried. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, the Monday morning buzz of pre-Thanksgiving productivity churned as usual. In Bend, Oregon, the first dusting of snow was already beginning to glaze the sidewalks. Coats were thicker voices, quieter. The office lobby smelled faintly of pine cleaner and cinnamon candles. Someone had placed near reception. Nora stepped out without another word. No one met her eyes. Her office was tucked in the southeast corner overlooking the edge of the Cascade foothills. She walked the familiar hallway, each step deliberate. An intern who normally waved pretended to check her phone. Nora entered and closed the door behind her with a soft click. The mug was still there, CDO since 2013 engraved in simple font. A gift from her team on her 5th anniversary, though she couldn't recall if any of them still worked here. Her fingers curled around it reflexively. Next was the framed photo of her and her father taken on her first day at Everwin. He had surprised her with a leather satchel worn and honey brown, still as solid as the day he gave it. She laid it gently on her desk. She packed slowly, letting her hands memorize each object as if touching them would tell her what they still meant. An executive pen unopened Christmas cards from last year. A project binder labeled Phoenix Initiative that would never be greenlit now. A shadow passed by the glass wall. When she looked up, Gavin Murphy stood silently in the hall. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just gave her a slow, respectful nod and then continued walking. It was all he could give and all she needed. The moment stretched quiet and oddly sacred until the soft ping of an incoming email broke it. She opened her laptop one last time. The subject line read, "Welcoming Savannah Lee as our new Chief Development Officer." She stared at the screen. It wasn't shock. It was cold, clean humiliation. The announcement was exuberant, filled with vague buzzwords and over-punctuated praise. It praised her successor's fresh vision and transformative mindset. Her own name wasn't mentioned once. It stung, but she stayed still. She clicked archive without reading further. The inbox dinged again. A new message. This one forwarded accidentally. She recognized the sender. Marshall Chu Everwin's Director of Mergers. The email was marked Confidential attached draft memo. Strategic Acquisition Proposal Project Evergreen. Estimated value 1008B. Below that, a small thread. In the original draft from 2 weeks ago, Nora's name had appeared in the acknowledgement section. In this version, she was gone. Not replaced, just erased. She leaned back slowly. That wasn't just a betrayal. That was deliberate revision. A rewriting of history like she'd never been there. A breath escaped her lips, slow and soundless. She glanced around the office one last time. The dim desk lamp cast a golden wash across the shelves. The soft notes of autumn leaves played over the lobby speakers just outside. She reached for the satchel, slid her mug in carefully and zipped it shut. It was heavier than she remembered. She didn't wait for an escort. As she walked past the elevators, a temp stood nearby with a box of client brochures. He looked up, uncertain whether to say something. He didn't. The elevator arrived with a chime, and Nora stepped inside alone. She pressed the ground floor button and didn't look back. Another email arrives by accident, forwarded to her, a leaked memo outlining a $1 8B strategic deal. Her name is erased from it. The bell above Marigold's cafe jingled as Nora stepped in her arms, wrapped around a cardboard box and a bruised dignity. The warm scent of pumpkin pie wrapped around her before the door even closed behind her. Afternoon sunlight poured through the frosted windows in long golden stripes, catching on the dust motes and the laminated pie menu near the register. Nora hesitated for just a breath before stepping fully inside, letting the door fall shut behind her with a soft thunk. Marigold's hadn't changed. The maplewood counters still gleamed under the track lighting. The vintage posters of Route 66 and 1940s jazz singers still held their corners proudly on the walls, and the faint sound of Bing Crosby singing Count Your Blessings hummed from the old jukebox near the kitchen as if the cafe had been waiting for her to return without asking why she'd stayed away. She chose the corner booth farthest from the entrance, her usual spot when she needed quiet. The leather of the bench was worn smooth from years of elbows and coffee mugs. She set the box down gently beside her on the seat. Inside were her last remnants of Everwin, a mug, a framed photo, a binder labeled Phoenix Initiative. Now just wait without meaning. The last time she sat here, it had been close to midnight. She was negotiating terms of a merger. Thomas had just erased her from. Her phone had pinged with updates, her fingers flying across the keyboard while she sipped lukewarm coffee and nodded to the barista for one more hour. She had believed in the work, then believed it mattered.
"Didn't expect to see you,"
Miss Sinclair, a gravelly voice said. She looked up. Hal. Jenkins stood beside her booth, leaning slightly on his cane. His flannel shirt was faded, tucked neatly into old jeans that had seen many winters. The smile he gave was soft at the edges, as if he understood without needing to ask. He set down his coffee cup and slid into the seat across from her like it was always meant to be his. "Hal," she said, her voice catching slightly.
"Been a while,"
he replied, nodding toward the cardboard box.
"That your dignity in there, or just the stuff they let you take?"
Nora exhaled something close to a laugh. "Bit of both figures," he said.
"They always forget the people who did the heavy lifting."
Maggie Delaney. The cafe's owner passed by just then, her apron dotted with flour and cinnamon. She paused mid-stride, her brow lifting when she saw Nora. "Well,
"I'll be,"
she murmured.
"It's been too long, sugar."
Nora started to rise, but Maggie waved her off. "Sit. I've got the usual. Still memorized. You want that bourbon pecan slice or the apple cranberry?" "Bourbon pecan." Nora said the words like a homecoming. "On the house. It's Thanksgiving week," Maggie said, already turning back toward the counter. Hal leaned in slightly, tapping one thick finger against the mug in front of him.
You remember when they were trying to push all us old dogs out back in 2020? Budget cuts, they said. I remember Nora said, "You made sure I stayed."
He continued, his voice quieter now.
Went to bat for me in that boardroom. Even told them my bad hip didn't stop me from knowing which pipes froze first in winter.
You deserve to be there, Hal, she said simply.
Maybe.
But that doesn't mean people like Thomas cared. He sipped his coffee, the steam curling around his weathered face. People like him forget what loyalty looks like. But you didn't. She looked away, her gaze landing on the tip jar at the counter, hand labeled with a marker in blocky script, "Give thanks." A customer dropped a few coins in, and Maggie smiled without glancing up. Hal shifted slightly in his seat, reaching slowly into his coat pocket.
I kept something. Just in case.
She blinked.
What kind of something?
He didn't answer. Just patted the inside pocket and leaned back. You'll know when it matters. Before she could press, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She pulled it out and frowned. A message from Gavin. Peter Alden just pulled his funding. They're panicking. She wasn't expecting another blow or an opportunity, but Ellis Monroe wasn't calling for small talk. The phone buzzed against the coffee table once. Then again, its sound unusually loud in the stillness of the apartment. Nora reached for it without thinking, her thumb hovering for a moment before she tapped accept. The morning had been slow hushed. Outside, the snow coated the sidewalks in thick, undisturbed layers, softening every passing sound to a near whisper. The city felt paused. Nora came. Ellis Monroe's voice low and measured like a cello warming up. You've had a week. She closed her eyes. That's one way to say it. There was a pause, the kind of silence that wasn't filler but space for something to be offered honestly. I won't keep you long, he said. This isn't a sympathy call. She leaned against the windowsill, one hand wrapping around the half-empty mug that had gone cold. The scent of hazelnut lingered faintly from the steam that had already faded. I didn't think it was, she said. You remember that clean energy partnership you closed in Denver? Horizon was watching. Peter Alden was watching. She turned slightly, her fingers tightening on the ceramic. Peter Ellis continued. He pulled his funding from Everwin yesterday, quietly but clean. He's aligning his portfolio with ours. More importantly, with you. She said nothing. We're building a new strategic division. I want you to lead it. Nora stayed still. Her breath fogged faintly on the window beside her. She had known Ellis for over a decade, sometimes as a rival, occasionally as an uneasy ally. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't flatter. He certainly didn't call unless something mattered. I'm not looking to tear anyone down. Ellis, she said. I'm tired. I'm not angry anymore, just done. I'm not asking you to fight, he said gently. I'm asking you to build. That's always been your edge. You don't play games. You invest in people. That's rare. She turned to face the room. The candle on the side table, one her mother used to keep near the front window. Each Thanksgiving sat unlit. The label was faded, but the scent still clung faintly vanilla clove, something that smelled like beginnings. Who else knows? She asked. 3 senior staff from Everwin already reached out. They're ready to follow. No drama, no press, just quiet exits. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, one leg tucked under the other. The exhaustion hadn't lifted, but something steadier was unfolding beneath it. Why me? She asked. Not as protest, but genuinely. Because even when you lost, he said, people knew they could trust you. She looked at the cold mug again, then placed it gently on a coaster beside her. "Send me the outline." He exhaled. "You'll have it in 20. True to his word, the documents landed in her inbox before she even rose to warm the coffee, along with them a short email from Peter Alden himself. "My portfolio follows Nora P. A. No signatures, no attachments, just faith." She lit the candle her mother once kept for good things. The flame was small at first, barely visible against the gray morning light, but it held steady. Her phone buzzed again. "From Hal Jenkins." Subject: "You should see this attachment, confidential audio, WMA." The article hit newsstands before sunrise. By breakfast, Nora was a headline. She stepped through the glass doors of Horizon Ventures just after 8:15. Her boots damp from the snow slush on the sidewalks. The wind had blown in sharp overnight, leaving a fine layer of frost along the edges of the building's tinted windows. Inside, the heaters hummed, steadily warming the open-plan office with a gentle mechanical heartbeat. Eyes turned as she walked through, not accusatory, just confused. Sympathetic, maybe. An intern quickly turned off the mounted TV near the entry lounge, but not before Nora caught a flash of her own face on the screen, cropped, unflatteringly eyes mid-blink. The ticker below read, "Breaking, former Everwin executive implicated in espionage allegations." Her lips thinned, but she didn't stop. Gavin was already waiting by her desk, his expression thunderous. "Who leaked it?" she asked, shrugging off her coat. He ran a hand through his graying hair. "Best guess, someone in Everwin's PR. Possibly Savannah. There's digital residue all over her terminal login from last night." Nora let out a slow breath and sat folding her hands over her knees. "I want proof, not speculation." Ellis appeared a moment later, a calm presence in a storm that had only just begun. "Legal's already flagged the story," he said, handing her a manila folder. "We're preparing a rebuttal, but I won't move forward without your approval." Nora flipped the folder open. The accusations were pointed and theatrical phrases like deliberate data theft, sustained manipulation of proprietary relationships, and suspiciously timed departure. It read less like journalism and more like a coordinated smear. "I don't want to counterattack," she said. "Not yet." Ellis nodded as if he'd expected that. "Then what facts?" she said. "All of them." A silence fell. Hal arrived mid-morning, tracking snow into the foyer and tipping his knit cap to no one in particular. He made his way toward her desk with the ease of someone who didn't care for decorum. In his hand was a flash drive, old and red with a chipped corner and a label that simply read, "Tuesday a.m. You'll want to listen to this alone," he said, voice low but firm. "Just wait until you've had coffee." She blinked. "Where did you get this?" "I don't ask questions when people leave things on my doorstep." He gave a slow, meaningful glance toward the coffee bar, then walked off toward the back of the office like he belonged there. Nora slipped the flash drive into her coat pocket and stood. She found an unused office near the end of the hall, closed the door, and booted up the media file. The audio was grainy but clear. Thomas's voice, unmistakable, clipped confident. "If we don't discredit her now, we'll be chasing her shadow in 6 months." Savannah's voice followed smooth with nervous laughter. "The memo's ready. Once the article hits, she won't get a seat at any table, especially not Horizon's." There was a clink of glass, the sound of ice swirling in a tumbler. Thomas again. Let her light candles. Let her talk loyalty. The market forgets fast if we make the noise loud enough. Nora sat still long after the recording ended. Her hands remained clasped in her lap. The heat from the vent whispered against her boots. Back at her desk, she opened her email. From Lydia Harper.
Subject worth your time. Message. Ms. Sinclair. I believe your side is the one worth hearing. Let's talk. The light from the ceiling panels buzzed faintly as Nora stepped up to the podium holding only a folder and her name. A hush fell over the room. Not dramatic, but dense with curiosity. Reporters shifted in their chairs, pens, poised phones blinking red in quiet readiness. Behind the long rows of chairs, the windows framed a cloudless winter morning. The city's skyline shimmered under the brittle December sun. But inside Horizon's conference room, it was all glass, quiet, and waiting. Nora adjusted the microphone, her fingers steady against the metal. She didn't clear her throat or offer preamble. She simply opened the folder. There's been a lot said about me this week, she began, her voice low, even. Most of it without basis. I'm here today not to retaliate, but to correct the record. At the back, Hal stood near the catering table, his flannel sleeves rolled to the forearms, a slice of pumpkin bread in one hand. He gave a small nod as she continued. He didn't speak, but his presence anchored the space. Nora pulled out the first page, her resignation letter from Everwin, dated and time-stamped nearly 3 weeks prior. This was submitted on November 9th, 2 full weeks before my final day. She held up another document, email correspondence from Everwin's HR department, formally acknowledging her clean exit. This, she said, is my clearance confirmation, signed, witnessed, and archived. The next was a thick sheaf of IT logs, all access revoked on November 20th. Before I ever set foot in Horizon's building, cameras clicked. She reached for the final piece, Horizon's strategic planning packet dated months earlier, long before her first conversation with Ellis Monroe. What Horizon has built and continues to build is theirs. I joined that journey, not engineered it from stolen blueprints. A few heads in the crowd tilted. Whispers flicked between rows. Then Hal stepped forward. He didn't move fast, but there was gravity to him. He approached the podium, resting one hand lightly on its edge. I'm not a lawyer, he said, his voice rough like gravel softened by time, but I've been around long enough to know the smell of a setup. Nora stepped aside slightly. Hal held up a small printed transcript. This here, he said, is from a recording. One I received through a backdoor channel. 2 voices. Thomas Greer and Savannah Lee discussing a media leak. Their words not assumptions, their strategy not her crime. The air grew still. No one asked how he'd gotten it. They didn't need to. Lydia Harper's pen stilled. She didn't raise her hand or interrupt. She simply watched Nora, eyes narrowing not in suspicion but focus. Nora thanked Hal quietly as he stepped back, returning to the perimeter of the room like a guardian who didn't need thanks. I won't answer questions today, Nora said at last, because this isn't about arguing with noise. It's about setting things straight and moving forward. She gathered the documents, slipped them neatly into her folder, and stepped away from the podium. The press didn't shout. They didn't chase. Later in the break room, someone reheated turkey in the microwave. The smell of rosemary and stuffing hung briefly in the air. A group of older staff sat by the coffee machine, murmuring about how Nora used to handle things even back then. By mid-afternoon, Lydia's article went live, The Quiet Rebuilding Nora Sinclair and the Price of Integrity. And as the sun began to fall behind the skyline, her phone lit up. Thomas Greer. Incoming call. We need to talk. Nora sat by the window at Marigold's cafe sipping coffee, the world still moving but no longer chasing her.
Outside, snowflakes fell in lazy spirals, catching in the edges of the cafe's twinkling Christmas lights. The frost traced delicate patterns on the window pane, but inside the scent of cinnamon and fresh pie warmed the space like a familiar blanket. Bing Crosby's voice floated gently from the corner speaker, crooning something soft and nostalgic. Nora cupped her mug in both hands, savoring the quiet. Her coat was draped over the chair beside her scarf, undone, and her satchel still worn, still stitched with memories, rested neatly against the table leg. This table, this chair, the same ones she'd sunk into weeks earlier, heart-heavy and arms full of everything she'd lost. Now they held nothing but space. Hal looked up from his newspaper in the corner, offered a small wave with 2 fingers. He was wearing his usual flannel, a Santa pin crooked on the collar. She smiled back. Maggie appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a checkered apron. "We're doing a gratitude plate today," she said, sliding a warm slice of pecan pie in front of Nora. "Only offer it to people who've made it through the storm and remembered their manners." Nora laughed softly. "Is that the price of pie now?" "No, darling," Maggie said, patting her shoulder. "That's the reward." The cafe bustled gently. A couple by the counter shared a laugh. 2 teenagers debated marshmallow toppings for their hot cocoa. Time, it seemed, had kept going. Nora just wasn't running to catch it anymore. Her phone buzzed. Thomas Greer. She hesitated, then answered. "I'd like to talk," he said without introduction. "There may be a path back if we can align public messaging." Nora leaned back slightly, eyes on the garland strung across the cafe window. "I didn't walk away to go back." "Thomas?" Silence crackled at the other end. She ended the call before he could answer. Hal wandered over, coffee in one hand, paper under the other. "He's still trying." She nodded. "Still selling even now." He pulled out the chair across from her. "I hear some of the folks who left Everwin are joining you at Horizon Quiet Moves, but steady ones." "That's the plan," she said, taking another sip. "Build something that doesn't need spin." Maggie reappeared with a tray of folded napkins. "Feel like helping an old woman prep for the senior brunch tomorrow?" she asked with a wink. Nora reached for a stack. "What's the theme?" "Gratitude and gossip," Maggie said. "Mostly gossip." They folded napkins together for a while. The movements were simple, rhythmic, comforting. The doorbell jingled. A familiar young face stepped inside Julia Tran, one of Nora's former interns. She scanned the cafe, spotted Nora, and approached. "Hi." "Ms. Sinclair," she said nervously. "I wasn't sure if... I just wanted to ask, does Horizon have room for someone who still wants to learn?" Nora looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "We might." Julia smiled with unmistakable relief, then excused herself to order coffee. Later, Nora returned to her table. She pulled out a small leather-bound notebook and opened to a fresh page. With steady penmanship, she wrote 2023 goals, build with care, lead with heart. She closed the notebook, tucked it back into her bag, and reached for her wallet. The tip she left was more than generous. Before she left, she helped Maggie fold the last of the napkins, then gave Hal a gentle squeeze on the shoulder as she passed. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft, slow, forgiving. On a quiet December morning, Nora Sinclair chose stillness over storms, grace over grudges. In a world quick to judge and quicker to forget kindness, she walked her own path with quiet dignity and unwavering heart. Kindness, when given freely, leaves echoes that outlast cruelty, and the strength to rebuild with compassion is far more enduring than any act of retaliation. Like a candle left glowing in the window, the smallest light of goodness has a way of finding its way back home.